A poised, colored woman extends her hand across the polished mahogany boardroom table. The white chairman, Arthur Sterling, glances at it with undisguised disdain. "I don't shake hands with the help," he says, smirking at his colleagues. The room temperature seems to drop several degrees. She withdraws her hand with practiced composure. "I'm not the help," she states quietly. Arthur laughs, turning to his all-male executive board. "Then what are you doing in my building?" She opens her leather ledger with deliberate movements, deciding whether to withdraw my $5 million buyout offer. Her voice never rises above a conversational level. The room freezes. Arthur's smile vanishes. The chairman's face drains of color as building security suddenly stands at attention. Eleanor Vance steps out of her deliberately modest Buick in the Sterling & Sons publishing parking garage. At 45, she carries herself with quiet confidence. Her understated elegance, a calculated choice. Today's mission: evaluate whether Sterling & Sons deserves a $5 million acquisition offer from her investment fund. She surveys the gleaming headquarters with practiced neutrality. Limestone and glass stretch skyward, a monument to literary success, and from her research, a potentially toxic corporate culture. Inside, the receptionist, Doris, glances up with a practiced smile that falters when she sees Eleanor. "I'm here for my 10 o'clock with Arthur Sterling," Eleanor states. Doris's eyebrows lift slightly. "Are you with the secretarial pool applicants? Personnel is on the 3rd floor." "I have an appointment with Mr. Sterling directly." Eleanor's voice remains even. "Eleanor Vance." Doris checks her appointment book, skepticism evident. "Please wait in that area." She gestures to a side seating section rather than the plush VIP lounge where 2 white men in suits are currently being served coffee. Eleanor notes this, but takes a seat without comment. She observes everything: the flow of employees, predominantly white and male, the hushed tones when someone glances her way, the assumptions operating beneath the surface. 45 minutes pass before Sterling's secretary retrieves her. Not the executive boardroom, but a small, windowless meeting room awaits. Arthur Sterling barely looks up from his papers when she enters, gesturing vaguely toward a chair across the table. 3 other executives, all white men in variations of the same gray flannel suit, exchange knowing glances. One suppresses a yawn. Internally, Eleanor recognizes the pattern. 20 years in finance has taught her to read these signals with precision. Each slight is familiar. The extended wait, the downgraded room, the dismissive greeting. She decides to observe how far they'll take the disrespect before revealing her position. Harrison finally sets down his pen. He looks at Eleanor for the first time, his gaze a cursory assessment. "So you're here about some community outreach program?" His tone suggests this is an obligation to be endured rather than a meeting of equals. "I'm here to discuss potential investment opportunities," Eleanor clarifies calmly. Sterling barely conceals his skepticism. "Right, investment." The word carries an undercurrent of disbelief. As Sterling prepares his condescending pitch, Eleanor receives a subtle nod from her associate, waiting by a payphone in the lobby, confirming he is ready to deploy or withdraw based on her assessment. "Let me walk you through what we do here at Sterling & Sons," Sterling begins, pulling up a presentation on a clumsy easel, clearly designed for non-professional audiences. The poster boards feature cartoonish graphics and oversimplified diagrams. "We're developing a cutting-edge catalog for discerning readers." He speaks with exaggerated slowness, pausing after basic concepts. "Are you following so far?" he asks after explaining what a galley proof is. Behind him, one executive whispers something to another, prompting muffled laughter. Eleanor leans forward slightly. Your annual report mentions a proprietary new lithographic printing method. Could you elaborate on how it differs from conventional offset printing, particularly regarding ink saturation when deployed for a mass-market paperback run? Sterling blinks, momentarily thrown. He fumbles with his notes. Well, it's quite technical. Perhaps my head of production could explain the complicated stuff later. His eyes dart to his colleagues for support. I'm also curious about the discrepancy in your last annual statement, Eleanor continues. Your reported paper expenditure dropped 22% while claiming expanded print initiatives. How do those figures reconcile? Sterling's expression hardens. He gestures for an aide to flip past the financial charts rapidly. I think these complex financial matters might be a bit beyond the scope of our discussion today. Perhaps we should focus on more appropriate topics, like how Sterling & Sons can appeal to the Negro market. His emphasis on appropriate hangs in the air. Inside Sterling's mind, alarms are sounding. This woman clearly knows her stuff, far more than anticipated. Rather than adjust his approach, he doubles down on condescension, his fragile authority threatened. Let's take a quick break, Sterling announces abruptly. Franklin, ask Beatrice to bring in some coffee. He turns to Eleanor with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. How do you take yours? Lots of cream and sugar, I bet. The racist implication sits heavily in the room. The executives exchange glances, some uncomfortable, others silently amused. Eleanor registers every micro-expression, every unspoken exchange. She closes her ledger with deliberate slowness, the soft leather binding making a gentle sound in the sudden silence. Her eyes meet Sterling's directly, unflinching. Before we continue, I'd like to see your diversity and inclusion statistics for editorial positions. Sterling's jaw tightens as he realizes this woman won't be as easily dismissed as he had planned. The meeting reconvenes in a larger conference room. Sterling has summoned additional reinforcements, including Franklin Hayes, Sterling's director of community outreach, and tellingly, the only other person of color in the building above the janitorial staff. Franklin will walk us through our diversity initiatives, Sterling announces, his tone suggesting he's being exceptionally accommodating. Franklin stands, clearly rehearsed. Sterling & Sons is committed to fostering an inclusive environment. Our hiring of underrepresented minorities has increased 8% year over year. He points to carefully curated photographs of smiling employees from various backgrounds. What's the retention rate for those hires? Eleanor asks. Franklin falters. I don't have those specific figures. And promotion pathways? How many people of color have moved into senior editorial roles in the past 5 years? We've implemented mentorship programs that we believe will bear fruit in the... Sterling interrupts. We're making progress. Rome wasn't built in a day. His dismissive wave cuts off further discussion as the conference room door opens. 5 more executives enter, all white men in their 50s. Sterling brightens immediately, standing to exchange firm handshakes and backslaps. Inside jokes flow freely about their recent golf outing. Olivia sits unacknowledged for 3 full minutes. When Sterling finally remembers her presence, his introduction is telling. Gentlemen, this is Eleanor. She's here today to discuss our community outreach, not Miss Vance, not a potential investor. Just Eleanor, reduced to a first name and an assumed agenda. The executives offer perfunctory nods. 2 don't make eye contact at all. One executive, James Rothschild, according to his nameplate, leans toward his colleague and whispers with deliberate audibility, "Civil rights appeasement visit. Play along and she'll be gone by lunch." Eleanor notes this without visible reaction, though her pen makes a small mark in her ledger. "Perhaps you'd like to share your story with the group," Sterling suggests to Eleanor, his tone patronizing. "I'm sure everyone would be interested in hearing about your journey." The implication is clear. Her value in this room is as a token, not as a business equal. When Eleanor begins discussing market trends instead, Sterling interrupts. "That's not really what everyone is interested in," he says with a forced laugh. "We have plenty of financial analysts. What we'd like to hear is your perspective as a—" He leaves the sentence hanging, but his meaning couldn't be clearer. A white man in a tailored suit enters the room. Sterling immediately stands, extending his hand with genuine respect. "Alan, glad you could join us." After greeting Alan warmly, Sterling turns back toward Eleanor. Their eyes meet. And in that moment, Sterling makes his choice. He deliberately places his hands behind his back and states plainly, "I don't shake hands with the help." The room falls uncomfortably silent. Some executives look away, embarrassed but unwilling to intervene. Others smirk slightly, complicit. Eleanor doesn't show shock or hurt, only a calm, evaluative gaze. In her mind, this isn't a new wound, but confirmation. This is exactly the evidence she came to find. The pattern she's encountered throughout her 20-year climb through finance's hostile terrain. Without breaking eye contact with Sterling, Eleanor gives a nearly imperceptible nod to her associate, visible through the doorway. "If you'll excuse me," Eleanor says evenly, rising from her seat. "I need to powder my nose." Sterling waves dismissively, already turning his attention back to Alan. The men immediately resume their conversation as if Eleanor had never been there. In the privacy of an empty powder room, Eleanor allows herself 3 deep breaths. Not from distress, but to center her focus. Her hand is steady as she finds a payphone in the hall. "Walter," she says when her CFO answers. "Initiate phase 1. "Both options are ready," Walter confirms. "The acquisition package or the withdrawal strategy. The team is parked 2 blocks away. On your word, we'll start signaling concerns to key market brokers." "Begin subtle market signals now," Eleanor instructs. "Make it look organic, just enough to get attention without revealing our hand." "And the full documentation package? Prepare it. I've noted everything verbatim in shorthand. They've given us exactly what we came for." She ends the call, studies her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back has navigated rooms like this her entire career. Rooms where her competence was questioned, her presence resented, her value diminished. But today is different. Today, she holds power they haven't bothered to recognize. Meanwhile, in the conference room, Sterling chuckles with his team. "Another civil rights box checked," he says, loosening his tie. "Corporate relations will be pleased we took the meeting. Now, about the Peterson acquisition." His secretary hurries in, a teletype slip in her hand, her expression anxious. "Sir, there's something you should see." Sterling frowns at the interruption. "What is it, Beatrice?" She shows him the message. Sterling & Sons stock has unexpectedly dipped 1.2% in the last 15 minutes. No negative news has broken. No explanation is apparent. "Probably just normal fluctuation," Sterling dismisses, though a flicker of concern crosses his face. "Nothing to worry about. When Eleanor returns, the mood in the room has subtly shifted. Several executives are whispering to each other. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor asks innocently. "Nothing to concern yourself with," Sterling replies curtly. "Just some market movement. Listen, miss." He pauses, realizing he's never properly acknowledged her surname. "I think we've covered everything for today. I'm sure you understand we have real business matters to attend to. Of course, Eleanor agrees pleasantly. I just need one final meeting with you alone, Mr. Sterling. Then I'll be on my way. Annoyed but eager to conclude her visit, Sterling agrees, leading her to his office while instructing his team to investigate the stock movement. Once the door closes, Eleanor's demeanor shifts subtly, still composed, but with an unmistakable firmness. I'd like to review my experience at Sterling & Sons today, she begins, her voice measured. I was kept waiting for 45 minutes, directed to a side area rather than your VIP lounge, presented with childish explanations of basic concepts, asked repeatedly if I could follow along, interrupted when discussing finance, referred to only by my first name, told my perspective was only valuable as a token, and finally explicitly refused a handshake with the statement that you don't shake hands with the help. Sterling begins to interrupt, but Eleanor continues methodically, her tone never rising. I have taken verbatim shorthand notes of our entire interaction. Sterling's face darkens as his private line buzzes with an incoming call flagged urgent from his largest shareholders. Sterling's phone buzzes again. Then again. He glances between it and Eleanor, conflict evident on his face. I need to take this, he says finally, no longer bothering with false courtesy. While Sterling speaks in hushed, urgent tones, Eleanor observes his office. The trophies of success displayed with deliberate prominence. The photographs with authors and politicians. The conspicuous absence of any women or people of color in leadership roles captured in the company photos. What do you mean down 3%? Sterling hisses into his phone. There's no news, no announcement, nothing. He listens, face growing increasingly tense. Vance Capital. Never heard of them. Why would they? He falls silent, listening. His eyes dart to Eleanor, then back to his desk. He has his secretary bring in the Who's Who in American Finance, his color draining as he flips to a page. Eleanor can track his discovery in real time. The frantic search for Eleanor Vance, the dawning horror as he reads the entry. Founder and president of Vance Capital, one of the most powerful colored-owned investment firms in the country. Over $50 million in managed assets, known for orchestrating takeovers of companies with mismanaged cultures. Sterling ends his call abruptly and stands, his entire demeanor transformed. The arrogance vanishes, replaced by naked panic. He hurries around his desk toward Eleanor. Ms. Vance, he begins, his voice suddenly obsequious. I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If I'd known who you were— No misunderstanding, Eleanor interrupts, standing to match his height. You were perfectly clear about who you thought I was and how you felt that person should be treated. She moves toward the door. Sterling physically blocks her path. Please, let's discuss this in private, he pleads, desperation evident. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits us both. The commotion draws attention. Employees in the hallway stop, watching. Some discreetly observe from their desks. The security guards, who had barely acknowledged Eleanor's entrance hours earlier, now stand at rigid attention, uncertain whether to intervene as their chairman grows increasingly agitated. The time for that conversation was when you thought I was nobody, Eleanor says, her composure unshaken despite Sterling's looming presence. He reaches for her arm but stops himself, awareness of witnesses dawning on him. You can't just— I can, Eleanor states simply. And I am. She steps around him with practiced grace, the movement of someone who has navigated obstacles her entire career. As Eleanor walks toward the exit, Sterling & Sons' stock price is being updated on the lobby chalkboard, the decline accelerating to 7%. Whispers ripple through the headquarters like electricity. Employees huddle around radios, frantically asking contacts about Eleanor Vance and Vance Capital. Articles are being hand-delivered from newsrooms, Vance Capital's history of ethical takeovers. How Eleanor Vance built a $50 million empire by demanding corporate accountability. Companies that flourished after Vance Capital replaced their leadership. In the executive boardroom, Sterling paces frantically. How did no one know who she was? How did this happen? The appointment was just listed as E. Vance, potential investor, his secretary explains, her voice trembling. There was no detailed briefing because you said it was just a community outreach obligation. We need to control this narrative now, Sterling snaps. The executive team, so relaxed and jovial earlier, now sits rigid with tension. James Rothschild, who had whispered about the appeasement visit, offers his solution. We need to find dirt on Vance. Everyone has skeletons. We find hers, threaten to expose her unless she backs off. Sterling considers this, desperation clouding his judgment. Meanwhile, Eleanor returns to her car, where Walter and her executive team await. On notepads and in ledgers, they monitor Sterling's market position in real time. Just our initial signals caused this drop, Walter explains, showing her the reports from their brokers. No public announcement, just strategic calls expressing concerns to key analysts. Imagine what happens when we go public with our decision. Another team member presents Eleanor with a leather-bound portfolio. Full documentation of today's discrimination, professionally transcribed from your shorthand notes, with timestamps. We've included contextual industry statistics on executive diversity for comparison. Eleanor reviews it meticulously. This isn't just about one company or one man, she says. This is about changing patterns. Back in Sterling's boardroom, his phone rings constantly. Board members demand explanations. The PR team drafts a statement focusing on miscommunications and Sterling's commitment to traditional values without acknowledging any specific wrongdoing. Sterling attempts to call Eleanor directly. A smooth, professional voice answers, Vance Capital. This is Arthur Sterling. I need to speak with Eleanor immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, the executive assistant replies coolly. Ms. Vance only takes calls from respectful potential business partners, not the help, as you put it. Would you like to leave a message? Before Sterling can respond, a newsboy's shout is heard from the street below, hawking a special edition of the Wall Street Journal. The headline is about them. Vance Capital has released a statement. We are reconsidering all potential acquisitions of companies without demonstrable inclusive cultures. Sterling & Sons isn't named specifically, but the timing leaves no doubt about the target. His phone chimes with a delivered telegram. Final acquisition decision meeting. Vance Capital. Tomorrow 9 a.m. You may bring one attorney. Morning radio shows buzz with speculation. Sterling & Sons Publishing experienced an unexplained 12% stock drop yesterday, reports a calm radio announcer. Sources suggest a major potential investor witnessed concerning behavior from Chairman Arthur Sterling, though details remain unconfirmed. Sterling arrives at his office to find the company in crisis. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, he sees his board of directors already assembled, without inviting him. Their animated gestures and grim expressions tell him everything. His secretary approaches cautiously, arms laden with papers. These just came in, sir. Telegrams from major shareholders demanding explanations about yesterday's stock movement and rumors about Vance Capital. Sterling grabs the stack, flipping through messages with increasing alarm. Words jump out. Deeply concerned. Fiduciary responsibility. Potential leadership change. Emergency shareholder meeting. Across town at Vance Capital's Park Avenue headquarters, Eleanor conducts her own strategy meeting. Her team reviews documentation and prepares for the upcoming confrontation. Are we being too harsh? Asks a junior team member. Sterling & Sons employs thousands of people. This could affect more than just Sterling. Eleanor considers the question carefully. Systemic change requires consequences, she explains. Companies understand one language fluently: money. The employees deserve better leadership, and the market deserves transparency about what kind of culture their investment supports. Her mind flashes through her career journey. Graduating top of her class, only to be offered secretarial positions while male classmates received junior executive titles, working nights and weekends to prove her worth, being mistaken for the coat check girl at every firm she worked for, building her own investment company from nothing, while potential clients questioned her credentials at every turn. Back at Sterling & Sons, Sterling huddles with his legal team. "We need to save the stock price," he insists, revealing his priorities. "Promise whatever minority outreach they want. Just make this go away." His attorney looks skeptical. "My advice is to appear contrite without admitting specific fault. Any explicit admission could trigger shareholder lawsuits and new EEOC complaints." On Madison Avenue and in Wall Street lunch clubs, whispers about Sterling's toxic culture are the topic of the day. Anonymous employees share stories through the grapevine. "I was told my accent was too ethnic for the editorial department. My ideas were dismissed, then presented by a male colleague a week later. Personnel buried 3 discrimination complaints last year alone." In his private bathroom, Sterling practices apologies in the mirror. "Ms. Vance, I sincerely regret if anything I said was misinterpreted." His phone interrupts the rehearsal. The board chair is calling. "Arthur, we've discovered previous discrimination complaints against you that were hidden from the board. Why are we just learning about these now?" As Sterling prepares to leave for the meeting with Eleanor, security arrives at his office with a board directive. He is temporarily suspended, effective immediately. Vance Capital headquarters stands in stark contrast to Sterling's stuffy, old-world offices. The building is elegant but modern, its power evident in its prime location rather than ostentatious design. The lobby features artwork from emerging colored artists and a wall displaying the firm's commitment: building wealth through values. Arthur Sterling arrives precisely at 9:00 a.m., his usual entourage conspicuously absent. Only his attorney accompanies him, both men looking tense in the elevator up to the meeting floor. The receptionist greets them politely, but without warmth. "Ms. Vance will see you shortly. Please wait here." She gestures to a seating area. Sterling checks his watch repeatedly as minutes turn to a quarter hour, then a half hour, then 45 minutes exactly. The same time Eleanor was kept waiting at Sterling & Sons. His attorney whispers warnings to stay calm as Sterling's jaw clenches tighter with each passing minute. When they're finally escorted to the conference room, Sterling steps through the door and freezes. This is not the small meeting he expected. Eleanor sits at the head of a massive table, now dressed in an impeccably tailored designer suit, subtle jewelry suggesting wealth without flaunting it. Around her sits her full executive team, the company's board of directors, and most surprisingly, representatives from 3 other major investment funds. The power dynamics couldn't be more reversed from their first meeting. Here, Eleanor is unquestionably in command, her authority evident in how everyone defers to her presence. "Mr. Sterling," she says, not rising, "please take a seat." Sterling attempts to take control of the narrative immediately. "Vance, I'd like to begin by expressing my sincere regret for any misunderstandings during your visit. Sterling & Sons values, tradition, and if I—" "This isn't about misunderstandings," Eleanor interrupts calmly. "This is about accountability." She opens a folder before her. Vance Capital was considering not just a $5 million investment in Sterling & Sons, but acquiring the company outright. Sterling's attorney shifts uncomfortably beside him. "We've been researching your company for 6 months," Eleanor continues. "Financial analysis, market positioning, competitive landscape, product pipeline, talent management. Yesterday's visit was the final assessment, a character evaluation of leadership." She slides a thick binder across the table. "This documents not just yesterday's incidents, but a pattern throughout Sterling's culture." Harrison flips through pages of testimonials from former employees, internal communications, pay disparity statistics, and promotion records, all revealing systematic bias. His face pales. "How did you get these internal documents?" "Former employees who were silenced by non-disclosure agreements, but who legally can speak to potential investors conducting due diligence," Eleanor explains. "Your legal department should have advised you of that exception." One of the other investment firm representatives leans forward. "Vance Capital approached us 3 months ago about a new initiative. We're collectively establishing investment standards that include corporate culture assessments. Companies with discriminatory practices will no longer receive funding, regardless of their profit potential." Another adds, "Sterling & Sons was our test case. Ms. Vance volunteered to conduct the final evaluation personally." Sterling suddenly understands the complete reversal. Eleanor wasn't seeking his approval or validation. She was determining whether he deserved her money. His attorney whispers urgently in his ear, but he barely registers the words. "Vance Capital was founded with a specific mission," Eleanor says, her voice carrying quiet authority. "For generations, people who look like me had to beg for seats at tables owned by people who look like you. I built my own table." She gestures to the executives around her, diverse in gender, race, and age. "We manage over 50 million in assets. The coalition of firms represented in this room controls over 200 million in investment capital." The magnitude becomes clear to Sterling. His company's future literally sits in the hands of the woman he wouldn't shake hands with yesterday. "This is reverse discrimination," Sterling attempts, desperation evident. "You're targeting me because I'm a white male in a position of power." Eleanor's expression doesn't change as she nods to an assistant, who places a small reel-to-reel tape recorder on the table and presses play. The room's speakers play his voice clearly. "I don't shake hands with the help." The recording continues with his other comments from throughout the day, each more damning than the last. When the audio ends, silence fills the room. Sterling's attorney writes something frantically on a notepad and slides it to him. Sterling ignores it. "What do you want?" he asks finally, defeat evident in his voice. Eleanor slides another document across the table. Sterling expects an acquisition offer at a devastatingly reduced price. Instead, he finds a comprehensive list of required changes to Sterling's corporate governance, hiring practices, and company culture. "This isn't a negotiation," Olivia states as Harrison reads the document. "It's the only path forward if Sterling & Sons wants to avoid a complete investor boycott. The fallout unfolds like a controlled demolition, systematic and thorough." Day 1. Sterling's board votes unanimously to remove Arthur Sterling permanently. The press release cites leadership inconsistent with company values without specifying details. They appoint head of finance Patricia Winters as interim president, their first female executive. The stock stabilizes at 15% below its previous value. Day 2. Vance Capital shares select documentation with the newly formed Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, triggering an official investigation into Sterling's hiring and promotion practices, one of the first of its kind. The carefully redacted materials protect individual privacy while establishing clear patterns of discrimination. Day 3. Former employees begin coming forward. Non-disclosure agreements that prohibited speaking about workplace culture are rendered unenforceable by the federal investigation. Stories emerge of systematic marginalization of women and minorities, particularly in editorial and leadership roles. Inside Sterling's boardroom, the remaining executives grapple with the scale of the crisis. Patricia Winters leads an emergency strategic session. "We have 3 paths," she explains to the somber group. "Fight the allegations and lose both in court and the market. Make superficial changes to weather the storm, or commit to genuine transformation." James Rothschild, Sterling's closest ally, argues for resistance. "This is extortion. They're using social pressure to dictate how we run our business." "No," Patricia counters. "They're using market forces to assign costs to discrimination. There's a difference." Across town at Vance Capital, Eleanor monitors developments with her team. They've neither announced nor denied their role in the upheaval, maintaining strategic silence while the company determines its own response. "They're at the crossroads," Walter observes. "Sterling's culture was deeply embedded. Changing it means acknowledging how many were complicit." Eleanor nods. "We're not looking to destroy Sterling and Sons. Their literary catalog has value, but leadership sets culture, and culture determines who contributes and who benefits. That needed disruption." By day 5, Sterling's board convenes for the most consequential decision in the company's history. The debate stretches for hours. Some older members resist, seeing the demands as capitulation. Younger directors recognize the business imperative of evolution. The pivotal moment comes unexpectedly. Thomas Chen, a typically quiet board member, speaks. "My daughter graduated top of her class from Vassar in literature," he says softly. "She worked at a publishing house like ours for 18 months. Her ideas were attributed to male colleagues. She was interrupted in meetings, assigned secretarial tasks despite her editorial role, and ultimately left the industry entirely." He looks around the table. "How many brilliant minds have we lost because we created environments where they couldn't thrive? This isn't just about legal exposure or stock price. It's about whether we're actually building the best company possible." His personal testimony shifts the atmosphere. The board votes 11-2 to implement all changes required by Vance Capital's document. Day 7. Sterling and Sons announces a comprehensive overhaul. Their public statement outlines specific commitments: transparent pay scales to eliminate gender and racial gaps, blind manuscript reviews to reduce hiring bias, mentorship programs for underrepresented employees, and a complete restructuring of leadership to ensure diverse perspectives at every level. Most significantly, they commit to regular independent audits of their culture and practices, with results tied to executive compensation. The publishing industry reacts with shock and rapid adaptation. Chairmen call emergency meetings to assess their own vulnerability. Personnel departments dust off outreach initiatives previously treated as checkbox exercises. Investment houses begin including culture assessments in their due diligence. Meanwhile, Sterling attempts damage control. He arranges meetings with former colleagues and industry connections, portraying himself as a victim of a changing world. Initially, some sympathize behind closed doors. Then the New York Times publishes an investigative piece titled "Pattern of Prejudice: Sterling's History of Discrimination Claims." The article details settlements and NDAs from 3 previous companies, establishing that Sterling's board had overlooked documented concerns during his hiring. Former allies distance themselves overnight, unwilling to risk association with toxicity that now carries measurable financial cost. Eleanor faces her own challenges. Critics accuse her of wielding power tactics no different from those she condemns. A radio host questions her directly. Some say you're using financial coercion to impose your values. How is that different from the power imbalances you claim to oppose? Eleanor answers without hesitation. The difference is that I'm using this power to open doors, not keep them closed. Power itself isn't the problem. It's whether it's used to expand or limit opportunity. The conversation shifts the narrative. Business publications begin examining the financial impact of exclusive cultures, quantifying lost innovation and talent flight. The Harvard Business Review publishes The Inclusion Premium, documenting higher returns from companies with diverse leadership. Within Sterling & Sons, transformation proves challenging but real. Some executives resign rather than adapt. Others embrace change with surprising enthusiasm, admitting privately they'd been uncomfortable with Sterling's approach, but feared the career consequences of challenging him. Patricia Winters implements a culture reset program developed with outside experts. Initial resistance gives way to cautious engagement as employees recognize the commitment extends beyond public relations. Anonymous feedback boxes reveal lingering issues, but also growing optimism. 3 months after Sterling's removal, Patricia presents the board with preliminary results. Improved employee retention, increased applications from diverse candidates, and gradual stock recovery as the market recognizes stabilization. This isn't a quick fix, she cautions. We're undoing patterns established over years, but the trajectory is clear. Behind the scenes, Vance Capital monitors progress. They're making genuine progress, Walter reports during their quarterly review. The question remains whether to proceed with an investment once they've met all conditions. Eleanor considers this carefully. Our goal wasn't punishment, but transformation. If they demonstrate real change, withholding investment would contradict our own mission. We need to recognize progress as clearly as we identified problems. 6 months after the confrontation, Sterling & Sons unveils its new permanent executive team. The leadership reflects genuine diversity, not through tokenism, but by recognizing previously overlooked talent and strategic external hires. Patricia Winters, now confirmed as permanent president, addresses employees and shareholders. Today marks not the end, but the beginning of our transformation. We've learned that inclusion isn't a peripheral value, but a core business strategy. That evening, Vance Capital receives an unexpected proposal from Sterling's board, a partnership to pioneer new industry standards for corporate culture accountability. The federal courthouse stands imposing against the gray morning sky. Inside, the hearing room fills with journalists and industry observers. Today, Arthur Sterling faces a formal hearing on the consolidated discrimination complaints, now formalized into one of the first class action suits under the new EEOC. Sterling enters flanked by an expensive legal team, his demeanor still projecting confidence. His testimony reveals his unchanged perspective. I've always maintained a meritocratic environment, he insists. If certain groups weren't advancing, perhaps we should examine their qualifications rather than assuming bias. The plaintiff's attorney methodically presents evidence. When asked about the "I don't shake hands with the help" comment, he responds defensively. I treat everyone with the level of respect they deserve based on their position. That's just business. So you believe certain people deserve less basic courtesy based on your perception of their status? The attorney presses. That's how the world works, Sterling snaps. After 3 days of testimony, the committee announces their findings. Harrison is found to have personally violated multiple anti-discrimination statutes, resulting in significant financial penalties and debarment from serving as an officer in any public company. As the room clears, Harrison finds himself face to face with Eleanor. "You destroyed everything I built," he says, his voice low with fury. "You built something that shouldn't have existed," Eleanor responds calmly. "You had power and used it to diminish others. I have power, and I used it to create consequences for that choice. The difference matters." As if on cue, a reporter calls out, "Mr. Sterling, any comment on Sterling and Sons stock returning to pre-scandal levels under its new leadership? Does this disprove your claim that such initiatives would damage the company?" Sterling pushes past reporters without answering, his narrative crumbling. 1 year later, the Waldorf Astoria hosts the annual Publishing Innovation Summit. The featured panel is Inclusive Standards, the New Market Imperative. Eleanor Vance takes the center seat, flanked by Patricia Winters, now lauded as a visionary CEO. "This was never about punishing one company," Eleanor responds to a question. "It was about challenging the assumption that discrimination has no cost." In a different arena, Arthur Sterling's attempt at a comeback falters. His new venture, a niche publishing house, fails to secure funding when backers discover his history. As the summit concludes, Eleanor addresses the audience. "Some call this a social agenda, but I call it an overdue alignment of values and value. Companies that systematically exclude talent make irrational economic decisions. Markets eventually correct irrational behavior." That evening, Eleanor receives an industry award and makes an unexpected announcement: a new $10 million Vance Capital Fund exclusively for underrepresented founders in publishing and media. Eleanor stands at her office window, overlooking the Park Avenue skyline. On her wall, the portfolio of Vance Capital now prominently features Sterling and Sons. The most satisfying changes are the ones that don't make headlines. The daily experiences of employees no longer facing the 1,000 small cuts of bias. Franklin Hayes, once the token director, is now Sterling's respected vice president of talent, his initiatives studied by other companies as best practice. Eleanor turns as her assistant announces her 4 o'clock appointment, a mentoring session with young colored women entering finance. One asks, "How did you stay so calm during the Sterling incident? I would have been furious." Eleanor smiles thoughtfully. "I've played the long game my entire career. Reacting emotionally offers a moment of satisfaction, but it undermines the larger mission. I didn't build this firm just to make money. I built it to change who has power and how they use it. That requires strategic patience." Later, Eleanor sits across from the CEO of a textbook company. He presents financials alongside diversity statistics and transparent pay structures. "We've been doing this for years," he explains. "Diverse perspectives improve our products." She sees a leadership team operating with mutual respect. She extends her hand across the table with a genuine smile. "Now this is a company I'd be proud to invest in." The story of Eleanor Vance shows that strategic patience and principled action can transform not just individual companies, but entire business cultures. What would you do with the power to change an industry? This story is a testament to the idea that true power is not measured by who you can dismiss, but by who you choose to elevate. And that a single act of courage can challenge a system, reminding us that progress, though often slow, is always possible. Thumb up, thumb down.